Okay, I think we're ready to make a start then. Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Big thanks to all of you for joining. It's a busy time all round at the moment, so we do appreciate you making time for us today. Big thanks to ILTA as well for being great hosts and helping us put this session together. We are quite excited to be hosting this one today, bringing telephony capabilities into Microsoft Teams is a bit of a hot topic at the moment. In the spirit of preparing for a post-pandemic workplace and continuing some of the innovation that we've seen a lot of over the past year, many firms and many companies really are looking to consolidate their legacy, often disparate and on-prem PBX systems into a common, consistent, managed cloud PBX. And Microsoft Teams has emerged as a perfect host platform for many. For a lot of organizations, it has become very well adopted and a bit of a mainstay for internal collaboration. So unifying communications by bringing those business critical external calling capabilities into Teams is naturally an attractive proposition for lots of people at the moment. But it's easier said than done, though, of course. So we're going to lean on our experience from the field and explain the key steps in making that implementation a successful one. And just first, a quick introduction to the speakers today. So I'll go first. My name is Michael Bodgia. I'm the head of our North American commercial team. I'm based in New York and have been at LoopUp for almost 10 years now. So I've helped oversee some of our largest deployments during that time, very experienced in this space with LoopUp. And we have Jason Sloan on the call as well. Jason, over to you.
Yep, thanks, Michael. Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Jason Sloan. I've been in the Microsoft Voice space now for 11 years, dating way back to the OCS days, if you're familiar, and I've helped organizations move to Microsoft Voice platform all the way through the Lync and Skype days and now into Teams. And along the way, learned a lot from when I configured to now strategy, getting people transitioned easily and nicely without having too much disruption. Hopefully we can pass that on to you today and answer questions at the end if we have some time. Appreciate everybody for joining.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And just on the questions side as well, please do feel free to post questions in the channel. We'll either get to them at the end of the call or we'll make sure we follow up where appropriate as well. And just very quickly before jumping in, a brief introduction to LoopUp. I know many of you will know us already. But the LoopUp platform is designed for premium sort of external collaboration and communication. And it presents itself in 3 products. So there's our managed event service for large sort of white glove event calls and webinars. There's our meetings platform or product for partner to client audio, web and video meetings. And then there's our cloud telephony product for secure, reliable calling within Microsoft Teams. And it's our experience delivering the latter that we're going to be leveraging today, as you mentioned, Jason. And there's plenty of experience. So we've been a Microsoft Voice partner at LoopUp since 2010, from the OCS days, as you point out, through Lync, Skype Online, and now Teams. We're a Microsoft Gold partner, member of the TAP program. So we're well placed and quite looking forward to sharing some guidance onto how we can make a successful implementation of Microsoft Teams calling. So Jason, I'll let you take control for the agenda and onwards.
Yep, thanks, Michael. Okay, so does everybody hear me okay? Michael, can you talk for them? Okay, I want to make sure I live out in the middle of nowhere now, so if you saw my background a little bit ago, that was my background is living out in the country, so make sure everybody, okay. So the agenda today is really 4 things with step 3 there that you see with 5 steps on successfully rolling to it. So there's a couple things we need to start with. We're going to talk about your story. We'll get into that a little bit more here as we go forward. We're going to talk about the challenges that I found over the last 11 years in the field. those 5 steps, and then just the key takeaways. Really, it's just a summary. And if we have a chance at the end, we'll do some Q&A. All right. So the first one here to really start with a successful rollout is understanding your story, right? So it's also called envisioning. If you speak with Microsoft, it's really understanding where you are in terms of getting ready to put teams in your environment. It could be a big shift. So understand what's your story. We really should understand you have executive sponsorship, right? So starting with telephony admins is good to have them technically involved, but we really have to have executive sponsorship to buy in on this, because it's a fundamental and paradigm shift for the users, going from a traditional handset into a soft client platform. So it can put a lot of stress and challenges on people. So if it comes from a business strategy, it's an easier message to give to the end users. Another understanding is, where are you with your Microsoft Voice familiarity? Are you coming from Link? Are you coming from Skype? If that's the case, the message is a lot easier, right? So people understand soft clients at that point. So the message is, hey, we're just going to change the look and feel, but you're still going to click to dial and those kind of things. If that's the case, then it eases the end user adoption and communication that we need to put out through your project. Another one is your team's familiarity in general. If it's already on the platform, that also helps with the story, right? People are used to it. They're typing messages. They're doing, Teams and all, or the channels and all that kind of stuff. Putting voice into it then becomes an easier message and easier sell to your end users. Right? So that's something we can take into consideration as we're talking through this. And then again, a legacy phone system, your legacy PBX, your Cisco's, your Abayas, all that kind of stuff. Again, if the story is you're completely coming from all that legacy stuff, there's no Teams, there's no Microsoft ever, it really the message has to be clear, right, to your end users that their life is really going to change. So it's important to understand that from the very beginning and start communicating out how things are going to change. And then we want to define your business goals up front. What are you trying to achieve? Yeah, we know you're going to Teams, but what's the reason? Is it because you want to get, more modern with the technologies? Is it Microsoft on the desktop completely, right? So if that's the strategy, or if it's Microsoft licensing, you're spending a lot of money on it, so you need to understand the changes Teams is going to bring to it, and then your culture. Is your culture okay with change? All this paints a picture, in addition to the story, on what it's going to take to get you to the end. And if it's a modern technology drive or a Microsoft licensing drive, then it's almost dictated that people are going to have to change. That makes the message to the end users kind of extend out, because now change management becomes really important to make sure that the message is clear. Like, we're going to it, we will do what we can, we will white glove you, we'll help answer questions and slowly move through the process. So it's very important to get that up front. So the next one is, what's the challenges from the field we found over the years? So a lot of it comes down to administering teams. It's a big part for your voice experts on the back end to shift from doing traditional PBX phone systems for the last 25, 30 years to saying, hey, you no longer have this physical box that you're working on. We need to make sure you understand how to administer it, because when users change, questions come, and if you don't know how to handle it from a technical standpoint, it creates a lot of friction, right? So we need to make sure that we get those people trained up. Don't go about it using the word "this is easy" and think that because it's no longer a box that we just need to port numbers up and off we go. It's a misnomer to say that it's easy. There's a lot of planning up front to make sure that this is smooth. So we hear easy, and it's kind of sometimes it can be taken the wrong way, because we understand that your business has other things to worry about. So it's not easy for you, because you may be helping and needing help from a partner. So that's where we come in and we help you understand how it can become easy, but we're very well aware that you need help, and we're there to help walk through it. As we talked about earlier, defining those expectations. What you're doing yesterday on your old phone system is not the way it's going to be tomorrow with Teams. Example would be, maybe very important, is boss admin, executive assistant situations, and how calls are handled. That changes a lot. right? And then how main numbers come in, that might change because your phone system might do it a different way. So we need to set those expectations to end users that's going to be different, right? And get them comfortable. And then end user feedback. As we're moving through the rollout, the planning, all the things that we'll talk about here later, we need to make sure that we let the users have a voice. I've found if you just configure the stuff and throw it out there, that the pushback is very strong from the end users, and it can often make a project fail. So then if you have a mandate coming from a Microsoft licensing strategy and you're getting pushback from the end users, that creates a lot of internal friction within your organization to try to make it a successful rollout. And then holistically, not planning. Just turn it on and assign phone numbers and shoot from the hip. It just doesn't end well. So a lot of the upfront planning that we'll talk about here in a little bit is very important. Take your time on the front end and the rest will move smoother. So what are those steps, right? So we typically take 5 steps, right? And this is again from years of experience where we kind of did the shoot from the hip early in Link days, right? Because we're getting right into Microsoft Voice and SNU, right? So now we've learned how to make these 5 steps very important. So a readiness assessment, typical design and planning, configure their environment, user migrations, and user check-ins. So kind of everything we talked about into nice 5 steps. We'll dig into those as we move forward. So the readiness assessment. This is to understand if there's any major blockers that will get in the way and slow down a rollout. Right? So really important to understand that your network is configured the way that Microsoft asks for it to be for a best practice to connect to the cloud. Right? So no longer is your traffic on your MPLS or on your network, on your RAN, on your LAN, where you have complete control. It's no longer that, right? It leaves and goes to the internet. So how do we make sure that connection is good before it hands off to the internet? There's so much that we can take care of, so much we can't. So Microsoft recommends, making sure that local internet at all your locations is how you connect to Office 365 and not through a centralized proxy, right? So we talk about things like that, network obstacles, which is like LAN optimizers and traffic accelerators, things that can get in the way of the traffic and make the end user experience negative. We talk about these, we document them, and then we can move forward with either a fix on your network, or you take a risk assessment and say, I think we're okay to move forward, maybe without quality of service as an example. And then another one here that's very important at the end is the team certified devices and licensing strategy. Have to make sure that your end users have a great device. So it's not like I'll pick on Apple a little bit. They have their headphones that are great for Apple products, but not so great for Teams. It kind of sounds fuzzy, a little jumbled, and it's not certified, so you don't get that high def experience that Microsoft is pushing with their voice quality and their codecs, right? So if you have users calling in with not so great of call quality, we can point back and say, hey, get a certified device, and that'll sound much better. If there's any questions on that, please feel free to leave it in the chat. So then we go to design and planning. I'm sure this is probably common rollout with any technology you put in. So this is a very important stage like anything else. It's where you spend most of your time with teams. So this comes down to gathering all the technical requirements for your locations, right? So everything from the dial plans, which would be like the 4-digit dial that you might do today, that might still need to be in your environment. We need to plan that out and test it. Even though we recommend moving away from that 4-digit dial, it still might be relevant in your environment. So we talk about that. Very important in the US is dynamic E911. So we need to understand if users are calling, where they're located in a building. That is very important planning. In the Skype and Link days, there was a lot of organizations that would skip that, and it's just not worth the gamble. So we're going to spend a lot of time up front learning about that. The main number routing, so you have a main line come in, we want to talk about those. Those can be staged completely and tested. So if you're moving away from an old phone system, you don't have to move away, port a phone number into Teams, and then hope it works right. So we want to talk about those, stage them all, test them, and then you start moving phone numbers into it. Network topology is within Teams as well. Everything with Microsoft Teams is based on what we call network sites, subnets, and trusted IPs. Because it's an internet-based solution, we have to understand where users are based on their public IP address. So it's very important to not skip that. Teams will work without it, in terms of calling and in and out. But if you really want the best experience and have nomadic users that move around, we have to take time and configure the network inside of Teams to match your network outside of Teams. So very important step. And then location-based routing, if it applies to you in India, there's some laws there that make sure that calls have to go out locally. The point is here that this is all stuff that has to be addressed, checked off the box, or check the boxes to make sure everything is asked and either configured or not. And then most importantly, when all the technical stuff is planned, the rollout of the users and the sites is paramount. So an example would be here, we would be doing site profiling. We configured all the core stuff, the subnets, the network topologies, but now we need to look at your end users. We need to go out to your end users and we need to say, how does your call routing work today? And they may say, our main number routes like this. We have an executive system over here, right? And we need boss admin, all those things we start talking about and develop a rollout plan based on those sites, right? And we'll put that into action here in the next couple steps. So once we have all the technical requirements documented, we can configure it all, right? It can all be staged and completely tested with either dummy numbers or just using some other methods inside of Teams to make sure it works great. So in my experience, I've done global rollouts and tested the whole thing before migrating users and migrating phone numbers. So configure all the requirements, stage and test it, and then start developing that end user plan and putting into action that we just talked about in the step before. So you might take a pilot set of users or a site, and we configure them based on what they need at their site. Like I said earlier, boss admin, call park, group call pickup, advanced call handling, that stuff's specific to each site. So we want to make sure we configure that and start testing it before we roll it out with a pilot process. Very important that we develop that end user plan. All right, so here we go. So then we get into the actual migration of the sites. So constant question is when we are brought in from partner standpoint and how do we roll it out? It's how do we not hurt the end users when we make these changes? So in my experience, I'll use an example of Dallas. If somebody says, hey, we have a Cisco environment, an old phone system in Dallas, we want to migrate that site, the very best approach is to not break that site up and move everybody in one shot. That would be the very best approach. So you don't have calls going to Cisco and calls going to Teams, because you might have a main number that's routing calls to different people, and we need that main number to be owned in one of your systems. So it has to be either Cisco or it has to be in Teams, and then you don't want users split out across platforms. So the very best scenario would be take Dallas, we plan, configure, test, and then they all go, right? Try not to break it up into small chunks, right? If that doesn't work, then we can go to the next route where maybe we, do 2 sites at a time, or whatever the case may be. The purpose here is to make sure early conversations, we understand your culture, back to the planning, to say, how do you think migrations will work in your environment? What's your story? If you say we need to migrate Dallas in 5 waves, 5 migration waves, we'll go back to you and say, here's the risks of doing that based on what you told me about your technical environment. So it's very important that we have those conversations early to make sure that what you have in your head doesn't have ramifications for your end users. So if you look at the 3 here on the screen, the recommended rollout strategy is cut everybody, one shot, all your users, which very uncommon, but it's the best approach. The next one is to base it off of a main number. If that doesn't work, then we'll just go to a whole site and deal with the ramifications if there are any. Okay, so back to the user check-in. Very important that we talk to the end users and get their feedback. I have seen early on in the Link days where if we don't treat the end users with respect, it will stop. And I'll use an example where we had an executive assistant who her stress went up when she had to do call handling with boss admin in Link because it wasn't the same as the Avaya. And it was just, it made her day stressful. She went back to the CEO and was like, this doesn't work for me. We need to shut this down. And they actually rolled back because it wasn't taken care of. It wasn't communicated well, the change that was coming. So back, early days, 2011, 2012, that's something that I had learned along the way is white glove your end users. Talk to them, give them a voice, let them talk back and say, this is what I don't like, this is what I like. You can learn that from your pilot in the previous steps with the first rollout. Then go to your second rollout, listen again, go to your third rollout, listen again, and at some point you'll finally find that sweet spot where the rollout happens without issues, right? And then you can speed up your transition. So I can't express enough, take everything, all the planning up front, and take great concern with the end users, give them a voice, and then you can speed up as you move forward. You may have to provide additional training to your end users. Don't train up front and think it's over. You may have to stop and pause along the way and retrain people. Don't get frustrated, and take your time with them and white glove them. And that really will help with your success. So key takeaways, really, if we sum up all of that conversation, I know I move fast because the time can go very quickly. If the key takeaways here are envision the story, right? Understand what are you trying to do, what are you trying to complete, gather requirements, spend as much time here as you can, don't rush that, technical requirements, end user requirements, think through the process of rolling it out, what's the ramifications of doing it this way, how do I get my end users involved, do we have excite days, all that kind of stuff, and then execute. And if you follow these, I don't move fast, but if you follow these, I can promise you that you'll have success when you come out on the backside. All right, Michael, back to you. I know I moved quick.
No, thanks, Jason. I appreciate you going through those. I'm going to open up for questions now. I'm just going to review the chat. Doesn't look like we have any that have come in on the chat. So perhaps if anyone does have any questions, you can just maybe raise a hand and I can try and bring you in. And for those who are pressed for time or maybe don't have questions, please feel free to drop. But let me just review now. Okay, we've got a few raised hands. Jason, do you mind bringing the raised hands in if you can?
Yep, I'll go ahead. Philip, I unmuted you. You should be good if you want to ask your question. I believe you're unmuted. Let's see, it did not. Give me 1 second here.
I think I'm good.
Okay, cool.
There we go. Thanks. There was a button to select unmute. That helps.
Right on.
Thank you guys for the presentation. It's something we're looking at right now. A few questions though. We are a Cisco call manager complete shop in the U.S. on-prem 10.5, and we have a tremendous amount of secretarial coverages. We have basically what's called neighborhoods. One attorney will ring to 5 secretaries. Because some of the old school attorneys do not want a call to go to an electronic platform. They want a physical person to pick up that phone. Yeah. My understanding was when looking at Teams maybe a year plus ago that it was not capable of really replicating the call flow and management that the Cisco call manager can handle. So is that improved? I know I've heard from other regions that we have that it has improved and it can replicate some of Cisco, but I guess fully what can it replicate that we're doing? That's my big concern with this.
Yep, that's absolutely fair. Yep, so I'll answer that, and I think it's very important that you asked that specific question. I tried to hit on it earlier, was the boss admin feature. It was very watered down a year and a half, 2 years ago. It has gotten better. But one thing to keep in mind before I get technical on that is there is going to be a change of behavior. Like I said earlier, coming from an Avaya or a Cisco, it has a lot of bells and whistles. A certain boss admin might happen a certain way. But with Teams, you can do boss admin where a call comes in. You can have 5, 6 assistants that can take that call. You can do ring down. You can put that order in how you want it. Maybe it goes to, user A first, user B second. You can do that kind of stuff now and do calls on behalf of. So the functionality is absolutely there. It just may not be a one-for-one change, right? That's where the user communication comes down.
Sure.
Is to say, hey, this is how it's different now. Are we okay with this before you roll it out, to your point?
Got it. Yeah, we struggled going from Avaya to Cisco, and that was pretty seamless. Some of these attorneys are like, I don't want another handset, and it's a phone, really. I mean, you got to deal with change, and as a global enterprise, we want to move towards Teams, and that is one of the big concerns that we have. So that's great. Thank you so much for the response.
Yep. All right, Michael, I saw your hand. I allowed your mic, so you should be able to unmute.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah, can. Yep.
Sure. So actually, my question is a follow-up to the previous. We haven't started to look into this, but something may be interested to us down the road. Is there, I guess, there's a physical phone? That's like question part one. Is there a physical phone equivalent, or is it strictly all software-based?
Yes, there is absolutely a physical phone. There's different certified phones, we'll call them, from Microsoft. Well, it's not from Microsoft. There's partners. So
Right.
Brands like Poly, Audio Codes, whatnot, they do have physical phones and sidecars, so you can see people lit up. And I would say the biggest change that you will have is probably going from physical buttons to sometimes these phones have push or touchscreens. Right, there are some physical button Teams phones, but I've had experience where they'll drop in touchscreen phones, and it's frustrating. Right, so it's another thing you want to profile with your users and give them a phone to test and say, do you like this? Right, will it work for you? But to answer your question, yes, there are absolutely phones.
Okay, yeah, and I think my question, the other part of my question was really already answered. Is if there are sidecars currently with Cisco customers that are used to doing it a certain way, but also had to do with the complexity of the setup, whether the Microsoft Teams solution can replicate it, or if there are certain things that are missing. You're saying that it may not be exactly the same, but functionality overall is there, just be a little differently.
Yes, exactly. So it's very important to understand those users and how their day operates, and what functionality they use, and what they may be able to not have to use tomorrow if Teams doesn't have that bell and whistle, right? They may still be able to do their job and do their job efficiently and just fine, but you may take something away, right? It's just a cautionary, comment. But in my experience, it's worked, and it's successfully worked if you plan and talk to those end users.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few questions in the chat actually related to devices, device management. I think a sort of theme is, some do's and don'ts, some advice for sort of handset selection. So just to sort of summarize the last answer, that yes, there are devices that work with this proposition. There's a list that we can share actually of Microsoft certified devices. I think that in terms of do's and don'ts, Jason, absolutely right. It's about sort of firm culture, what people are willing to change to. I think there are some quite cool handsets, but they feel quite different to some. So the strategy for some is going to be, we want to get a certified handset that looks as similar to the ones we have today. Others are, no, we want to distance ourselves completely from the old and embrace the new.
I see some questions. I'll run down real quick with short answers. So can you provide guidance on physical phones, set selection, do's and don'ts? Don't assume your end users will want a certain phone because the price point's nice. I recommend bringing in different phones and letting everybody test them and make sure that they meet the needs. Advantage on Operator Connect versus direct routing, PSTN calling plan. So Operator Connect is still just a thought right now, right? So we can't test it. So what's the advantage? There really isn't one yet, of course. Direct routing versus PSTN calling plans, it's managed services. And if you have something you want to bring in, Michael, and coverage, right? So it's coverage across the globe. Something we have is our coverage is very robust. Michael, do you have anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, well, I think this is sort of one of the questions of the moment, right? It's, should we just go with Microsoft for calling plans, or should we engage with a specialist partner? It depends is probably the best answer. Some will be best placed for either avenue, but for organizations that are international, certainly those with users who need a bit of hand holding, where there's quite a complex environment that's being moved away from direct routing, and a managed service is probably the best bet. I should say as well, just to the group, we have sort of hit time. I've been asked to say that when we do. We can certainly continue going through the answers, though, for anyone who's still available. For anyone who has to drop, who's asked a question that maybe doesn't have an answer yet, I'll do my best to follow up on those. So I think, should we try and cover a few more questions, Jason?
Sure. Yep. You tell me which ones.
Yeah. Let me just jump into the chat. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for putting all of these in. Let's have a little look here. One's quite an interesting one around stability. So, do you know if Microsoft is doing anything to improve stability? The last few months have had too many outages, is the direct quote. Do you want to take that one, Jason?
It's tough to speak on behalf of Microsoft and what they're doing to improve. I mean, it is unfortunate that they've had the outages that they had. From our standpoint, our product is the voice routing outside of that, so we make sure that we can handle failover and whatnot from getting to the carriers, right? But in terms of Microsoft, I think they just continue to improve Azure. It's like I said, it's tough to answer that question, and it's just unfortunate they've had those outages. But I still put trust into it. I wouldn't be in this industry without it. I still think that it's a good product, and there are solutions to help protect against the Teams outage, right? With the survival branch appliances and whatnot, those can be dropped in and make sure that your voice is always resilient.
Yeah, exactly right. I think this is an important question at the moment, because we're sort of talking about truly unifying communications here. Unified communications has been a sort of buzz term for at least 10 years, but we've never really quite got there. We have internal IM, chat, meetings, phone system, document sharing. It's still very disparate. And I think when we are talking about really bringing something within a single pane of glass, that's a fair question. If everything's in Teams, what if Teams goes down? And I think the primary benefit, as you say, is it's a very stable platform, and there are some ways around issues with outages, like SBAs, and some vendors will have SBC configurations that will allow for auto failover and disaster routing and things like that. So I think we'll try and do one more question. So is there an option of a hybrid solution, sort of on-prem as well as cloud? Is that supported, or is it sort of all one way or the other?
So I'll take that. So hybrid in this context is direct routing, right? So the SBCs are not PSTN calling, right? So that would be what we would say is a hybrid, right? And you could do on-prem SBCs, right, and own them in your environment. That would be another way hybrid. But from our standpoint, it's our SBCs sending calls up into the cloud. So that would say hope that answers your question.
Yeah, great. Very good. Awesome. Thanks for confirming, Philip. So I think what we'll do is we'll get the other questions answered as best as we can offline. Really do appreciate everyone making time. Apologies for going slightly over. We were doing our best not to. But great questions. So good reason to, I suppose. But thanks everyone for your time. Hope you enjoy some of the other presentations. And Jason, thanks for your help.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Yep, thank you. And actually, just before I drop, someone mentioned about sharing questions and answers, and I'll share them either via ILTA, and we'll make sure everyone gets the questions and answers. But Thanks a lot, everyone. Goodbye.